On this episode, we look at the Safe Passages program for school children in Draper, Utah. A professor is doing research on cell phones and driving distractions at the University of Utah. Denver has separate trails for pedestrians and bicyclists in congested areas. Finally, we talk with two participants in the Neighborhood Pace Car program in Boise, Idaho. Stay tuned. We're in Draper, Utah, talking with Lieutenant Rod Lowry with the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. What is Operation Safe Passages?
Operation Safe Passage is a school-based program that utilizes parent volunteers, or really anybody who wants to volunteer, to man the safe walking routes to and from school, to monitor the pedestrian traffic and to ensure the safety of the children as they walk to and from school.
How did it get started? Why does it exist?
Back in 1996, Salt Lake County experienced a rash of child abductions, and in an effort to address that problem, we brainstormed the idea, we being the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, brainstormed the idea of Operation Safe Passage, and together with the Jordan and Granite School District, brought it to the schools, to the principals, to the PTA officials, and then ultimately to the parents, who all grasped at the idea, and it was born.
And it's had a side benefit other than preventing abductions. What other benefit has it had?
Well, that was our main goal, was to obviously prevent any more abductions. One was too many. But that was our main goal, was to prevent any additional abductions. But what we found was that it really reduced the traffic problems in and around the schools. We had several schools that were located along major arteries, heavy traffic flow, and when we had our volunteers out there in their distinctive vests with their clipboards and their pads of paper writing down license numbers, we found that the speed problems reduced dramatically. Reckless driving problems reduced, and we only had to take a few corrective actions, and to date there has been no traffic deaths or no traffic injuries of students where Operation Safe Passage has been instituted.
Now, once you get to school grounds, you have something called the Parent Parking Patrol. What's that?
That's correct. Once Operation Safe Passage is a safety program away from the school, and Parent Parking Patrol is a safety program for the students while they're on school property. And it works really well in schools where there's a lot of vehicular traffic, of parents bringing their kids to the school. And what we do is we dedicate an area where the vehicles drive into. We have a dedicated drop-off point or pickup point. It's the same. And then once they've completed that, then they leave by a dedicated area. And what we found is that it enables the people who are bringing their children to school to enter and exit the school in a much more efficient manner, and we eliminate any problems with kids getting out of the wrong side of the car, or running in front of the car, or running behind the car when the car's backing up. And again, in the schools where that program has been instituted, we haven't had any problems.
And it sounds like it might be a bit of work to keep these programs organized. Who actually runs them day to day?
The Sheriff's Office has facilitated the programs happening, but the people who actually run the program are the volunteers and the volunteer coordinators themselves. And it's an investment in time, but the payoff is the overall safety for their children. And so we found that more so than not, we have enough volunteers to at least adequately staff the program, and it is a challenge year by year to keep the volunteers going, to keep their desire for the program high. But what we found is that complacency can take over, but the reason that there's nothing happening is the fact that they're out there and they're doing their job. And so the Sheriff's Office tries to monitor that for them. We try to keep them involved. We try to keep them interested in the program, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
We're in Salt Lake City talking with David Strayer, who's with the Department of Psychology at the University of Utah. What's this machine behind us?
It's a high-fidelity driving simulator. It allows us to precisely control the traffic and allow us to measure performance very accurately. And so we can look at how various activities that people engage in while they're driving affect their driving performance.
What sort of activities have you been looking at?
We've been focusing primarily on how cell phones interfere with or have an impact on driving. Looking at either a conventional handheld cell phone or looking at a hands-free cell phone, trying to see if you're impaired while driving and using a cell phone, and if you are impaired, why are you impaired?
What have you found out?
Well, one of the things we found out is that there seem to be two sources of interference when you use a cell phone. One has to do with the kind of obvious effect of reaching for the cell phone, the manual manipulation of the cell phone, dialing, and so forth. What we've been focusing on is the less obvious but also significant effect of the conversation itself and what it does, the cell phone conversation itself and what it does to driving performance. What we found there is that the conversation produces significant impairments. You're slower to react to unpredictable events. You miss unpredictable events. The way in which you view the world while you're talking on a cell phone is different than when you aren't using a cell phone.
Is there much difference between a handheld and a hands-free device on that type of distraction?
That was one of the first questions we looked at was, would a hands-free cell phone produce benefits? Would it actually solve the problems? And what we found was the answer was no, that in our experiments you were as equally likely to miss events or as slow to respond to events when you were using a handheld cell phone as a hands-free cell phone. The short answer is using a hands-free cell phone didn't produce the kinds of safety benefits that you might think.
What sort of behavior is going on? I mean, how does this relate to psychology, the whole science? Why would you expect this sort of thing to happen or not happen?
This is a kind of a classic divided attention task. As you know, driving is a very complex behavior, and it requires you to be able to attend and monitor to a lot of events that are happening as you're driving through the world. When you engage in a number of other activities like talking on a cell phone, attention is directed away or diverted away from the driving environment to the conversation. And that diversion of attention is one of the things that seems to be leading to the impairments in performance. It takes time to shift attention back from the conversation back to the driving environment, and that time, maybe the time it takes to react and avoid a child who darts across the road or something like that.
What other research has been done in this area, and what sort of research needs to be done still and yet?
Well, first, what's been done? We know that based on actuarial data that you are up to 4 times as likely to get into an accident when you're talking on a cell phone. Best guess is that that level of impairment is similar to the level of impairment you see while people are drinking and driving. We have a pretty good idea that the manual components of manipulation of the cell phone, reaching for CDs, turning on a radio, and those kinds of activities produce impairment. We're now trying to look at what happens with these more mental activities that take you away from the driving environment into some kind of a virtual reality of a conversation between you and the person who's at the end of the phone. What needs to be done? Actually, there's still quite a bit of basic science needed to be done. Why is it that your attention, why is it that you get these deficits? What aspects of the conversation lead to impairments? Does it matter how deeply engaged you are in the conversation? Or will relatively, just being active, just being on the cell phone, or just being on a phone in general, will that produce the interference? What about people who are older. We know that older adults typically show divided attention deficits. They also show greater levels of accidents. We would expect, we haven't done the studies yet, but we would predict that older adults are going to be much more impaired when they try and use some of the advanced electronics that are making their way into cars. Oftentimes we're asked, well, if carrying on a conversation produces interference when I'm talking on a cell phone, what about carrying on a conversation when someone's sitting right next to you in the car? Again, there's anecdotal evidence and some preliminary experimental evidence that says that that is less likely to interfere with performance than driving than when you're on a cell phone. And we think that has to do with the fact that normal conversation involves a lot of nonverbal cues that govern the flow of a conversation, including things like how difficult the driving environment is. And as the driving difficulty increases, people tend to kind of not talk as much while they're driving. When you're on a cell phone, of course, the person at the end of the phone doesn't have any idea what the driving conditions are like, so they can't modulate their conversation. So how does this differ from kind of other activities that people commonly engage in, like carrying on a conversation, like listening to a book on tape, like listening to a radio? Our research shows that the more engaged you are in the conversation, the more actively engaged you are, the greater the impairment you see. For example, you might think that if I listen to a book on tape, that might produce interference. It's a verbal form of communication. You have to pay attention to it while you're driving. We looked at that. There wasn't any interference at all. So it's not the passive listening to verbal communication. It's that active participation in the conversation that seems to be what's driving the interference.
Are there public policy implications for this type of research?
Oh, sure, there should be. One of the things has to do with much of the legislation that's been proposed or enacted in several municipalities makes the implicit assumption that it's the manual components of the cell phone conversation that are leading to impairments. And they certainly do lead to impairment. But those could be solved with a variety of technical innovations like a hands-free cell phone, automated voice dialing, and so forth. Our research says that even if you have all these new aids, you're still going to get interference because the conversation itself leads to interference. So it definitely, these things do have an implication on public policy. Bear in mind that one of the things to think about when people are with a cell phone conversation and driving issue, or the cell phones and driving issue, is that a lot of people are doing it. Right now, there's about 116 million people in the United States who have cell phones, and 60% of the time that they're using their cell phone, it's while they're driving. That means that you have tens of millions of people every day using their cell phone while driving. We don't know the precise numbers in terms of how many accidents that's leading up to, but there are clear cases where it has led to accidents, where it's very likely that those accidents wouldn't have happened had the person been not talking on a cell phone. We're trying to do the science right now to give people the precise numbers to say exactly how likely someone is to get in an accident when they engage in various kinds of behaviors in a car, like talking on a cell phone, like using automated navigation systems, like surfing on the internet, like watching TV while driving, and so forth.
We're in Denver, Colorado, talking with Jason Longsdorf, who's the Alternative Modes Planner. What's this trail behind us?
This is the Cherry Creek Greenway, which is a partnership between the City of Denver and the Greenway Foundation. This particular stretch is the most popular trail in the city, actually in the state. It's a multi-use trail for everything from bicycle race training to moms out with their strollers and dogs on leashes.
And this sign behind us says pedestrians only. What happens with the bicycles?
There are two sections. We're in what we call the wheels and heels section of the trail. This is the downtown section, which is the busiest. It's about 1.5 miles long. And we actually have pedestrians only on one side. So those are the joggers, walkers, like I was saying before, the moms with the strollers. And then on the other side, we have the wheels section of the trail. That's for the rollerblades, the bicyclists, those people who are moving a little bit quicker. And where we had the room on the trail, especially where it was the most congested downtown, we wanted to split those up for safety reasons. It reduces a large percentage of the conflicts that we have on the trail.
Has that been successful? Are people happy with the segregation of uses?
It's been incredibly successful. There were almost no complaints when we set it up, and even tourists find the signs easy enough to read. It's pretty rare that you come down and find somebody using the wrong side of the trail depending on their mode of travel.
We're in Boise, Idaho, talking with Ann Hausrath. What is the Neighborhood Pace Car Program?
It is an attempt by drivers who are also pedestrians to slow ourselves, to consciously choose to drive the speed limit, to stop and act courteously for pedestrians and bicyclists, and to actively reduce our car usage. And we do this all just voluntarily. We display a sticker on the back of our car. We try to put something funny on our car. And it doesn't cost any government money. We don't have to wait for anyone to approve it. It can start right now. Anyone who wants to can just start driving the speed limit every time. And the speed limit in this neighborhood right here is 20 miles an hour. Almost no one does it.
Where'd the idea for this come from?
It came out of a meeting with David Engwich here exactly a year ago. There was a woman on a very busy street here in Boise who called herself a Northview, that was the name of the street, pilot car. And she would drive the speed limit down the street in the morning, escorting her neighbors out of their driveways, and then she'd turn around and come back. And I heard her talk about this, but it didn't particularly interest me because it seemed to me she was taking extra trips to do this. But through a workshop when David was here, we basically batted the idea around and decided that it could work on any street, and you didn't need to make special trips. It just every time we drive, and we try to drive as little as possible, we drive slowly, we drive courteously, and we make a special effort to allow pedestrians to cross at every intersection, whether there's a crosswalk or not, because that's the state law, and it's almost never obeyed.
What sort of effect does that have on your neighborhood when people actually are courteous and lawful?
Well, obviously it's phenomenal. And I guess the other part of the pace car thing is you reduce your car usage. You also take active steps to reclaim your street, right? So if the drivers are actually going 20 miles an hour, they will see you, right? They can smile at you, they can wave at you. We would hope, and we haven't put it on there, that pace car drivers will not talk on their cell phones when they're driving. They won't paint their fingernails, they won't put on makeup, they won't eat when they're driving through neighborhoods. But it makes a huge difference, because we then see that the cars and the people in them, and we see the people in them, are guests in our neighborhood, that this is not just a thoroughfare, but it's a place where we live and they see us, and we can continue to run across the street to borrow a cup of sugar, which is things that we do, without risk of being run over.
What's the future of the pace car program? Where do you see it going?
Well, eventually, and I hope within my lifetime, we won't need the pace car program. I mean, if we're all trained to be courteous, to drive as little as possible, to start using our front yards and the streets for what they were designed for, which is an exchange of ideas rather than just as parking lots or transportation, car transportation corridors, it'll become totally unnecessary. That we won't need little stickers on the back. We won't need to identify ourselves because the vast majority of us will be doing these things.
We're in Boise talking with Kathy Pierce. How has driver behavior changed in Boise over the years?
Okay, in the last 10 or 11 years, Boise has grown tremendously. And it has moved from a more compact community to a spread out community. And people used to allow themselves 10 minutes to get from point B to point A. And the fact that they moved out to point C, they have not increased the amount of time they allow themselves to get to point A. So in order to cover the extra distance, they have increased their speeds, stopping for pedestrians, stopping for stop signs, stopping at red lights before they made free right-hand turns. They are in a hurry because they're not allowing themselves just that little bit more time to cover the extra distance that is part of their commute.
What happened here in this picnic shelter a year ago?
Okay. 1 year ago, in June, a group of angry residents of Northview Street met. I was one of those. They had taken what had been a wonderful residential street, and because of some construction and a new road opening, they had increased the traffic on our street by an additional 2/3. And not only were we dealing with vastly increased volumes, but the people were in a hurry. And they were driving, this is a 25-mile-an-hour street with houses and driveways on both sides. The people were driving down here at 35, 45 miles an hour, routinely. And it was like we couldn't back out of our driveways. We were scared to death to let our kids even walk to this park. We were at our wits' end. We had contacted the highway district. They had tried a couple of things which were successful, but they didn't like them. And there was a public outcry against them by people who didn't live here. So they took them out and they said to us, you have to find something, you guys have to agree on something and you have to come up with something, but it can't be stop signs and it cannot be a physical barrier of any type, and good luck. And it was kind of like, what? So we went to the police department and we said, help. And they said, well, we'll increase our enforcement. And they did. And for a period of time, our street was the most heavily patrolled, most heavily ticketed street in Boise. And the minute the police cars were off the street, the speeding continued. It only was effective so long as that police officer was physically there. And they can't be on one street 24 hours a day. It's not feasible. So David Engwich had come to town and had met with us earlier and had said, string your banners and do your thing. And we're kind of conservative here, and we kind of said, no, it isn't going to work for us. There's got to be a better way. And in this picnic shelter in this park, we sat and we talked, and one of the gals said, well, I've just started driving the speed limit and I can back up, see how many cars I can back up by just driving the speed limit. We're not talking 10 or 15 miles an hour, we're talking 25. And another gentleman said, I do that too. And I said, my children and I do this. And another gentleman said, well, I do it too. And we realized that although not organized, this was what we were trying, was to get people to go slow by backing them up behind us. We were physical barriers moving down the street. And then came this change in attitude among those of us who really started the program. And as opposed to being angry with these people for driving down our street, all of a sudden we realized that they just don't know any better. And so this has become, the Pace Car program is kind of a re-education program for people who have forgotten what speed limits are and what being a courteous driver is and what being part of a community is. And so we're reclaiming our streets one at a time, one driver at a time. One driver who says, I care enough that I will drive the speed limit. I care enough that I will stop for pedestrians. I care enough I will give bicyclists a break. I care enough about this community to help with neighborhoods not being torn apart by drivers speeding down the streets. And that's kind of where I am.
Does this end up having an impact in the community beyond just traffic?
Oh, it has a huge impact on the community. As people become more and more aware of what they're doing, and as they stop their bad habits, they are revitalizing every neighborhood that they drive through. They are creating a friendlier, happier, more pleasant place to live and work. They, as they start minimizing their car use, they find that they're saving themselves money, they're having a positive impact on our air pollution problem. And Boise has a horrible inversion problem, both summer and winter. In the winter, it's much more visible, but it is present summer and winter. And so we're creating a much better place to live by doing this. For every person that's on a bicycle or walking to the store, and if the cars are not going so fast, then it's safe again to walk to the store or ride your bicycle to the store. Then it becomes nicer and more people join. And it's like this cool snowball effect of, gee, if I do this in this neighborhood, then they'll do this in my neighborhood, and both of our neighborhoods benefit. And so I'm finding that as we just got a call the other day from a man who lives in a real outlying neighborhood who wanted to know, what can I do about this? I used to live out here and it was quiet and there weren't very many houses and there weren't very many cars. And now we've got all these people and they're all driving 45 and 50 miles an hour on a 30-mile-an-hour road. And we said, hey, let us talk to you about the Pace Car program. Because it starts with just one, but then you tell the guy that lives next door about it. And he goes, well, that's really cool. I can do that. And the thing is, the program is so simple. And it is so difficult at the same time. It is very, very easy to say, all we're asking is that you obey the law and respect your neighbors. Think about it. That is really, really hard to put in practice when you have become accustomed to speeding every place you go, pushing the tail of the guy in front of you, practically running over pedestrians all the time. It's a whole new way of doing things. And it's not easy. It's hard to make that change. But once you do make that change, all of a sudden you find you're a lot more relaxed when you're driving and you're not angry anymore. You really aren't angry. You're willing to, wave at the people walking down the street and I have people blow their horn at me and I just wave, and smile at them. I'm out there, I'm going to kill them with kindness or convert them with kindness, one or the other.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.